Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Ebro webinar. My name is Michael, and I'm the coordinator for today's presentation. If for some reason you are experiencing any technical issues with GoToWebinar, please send me a message using the chat or question panel that's on the right side of your screen. If for some reason you can't see it and you still need to communicate with me, you can just send me an email using the email address that was included in the invitation. So you've probably noticed that you have been muted. This is not a technical issue on your end, so please don't panic. Actually, all attendees have been automatically muted to help keep the line free of any background noises and to improve the overall quality of the webinar for everyone. Before I introduce our guest presenter, I'd just like to share a couple of points about the schedule for today. The webinar is approximately 60 minutes long, with the last 10 to 15 minutes reserved for a Q&A session. We kindly ask that you hold all of your questions until this time. We are, of course, recording this webinar, and a link to the recording will be shared with everyone who registered. For your convenience, we will be sending all registrants a follow-up email next week. The email will include a link to the PowerPoint presentation, as well as the webinar recording and a list of all the questions and answers that are covered during the webinar. And finally, and most importantly, our presenter today is Mr. Allan Javier. Hello, Allan.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for supporting this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks, Allan. And for those of you who have never met Allan, he is our extremely knowledgeable Ebro product manager covering the AP region. Allan has over 20 years of experience in thermal process validation. He is an FDA and BRC recognized process authority. He writes IQ, OQ, and PQ for software validations. He prepares validation protocols for various applications and is a true gentleman. Okay, Allan, now that I've built you up to some Superman status, I'll pass the microphone to you.
Yeah, no, it's Superman status, Michael. Thank you very much. I'd prefer to be called Iron Man, though. Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very pleased to have you here, and thank you for your time in attending this webinar. I'm going to go through the presentations now because we do not have so much time. Oops. Michael, I'm having some issues. My presentation is not on.
Allan, try hitting the, there you go, it's coming back.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Apologize. Okay. I have prepared this presentation for our three most important segments of the industry. And, this is live, and if there are some urgent questions, really, but although I prefer all the questions to be at the end of the webinar, I made this presentation for only these three industries: the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the medical industry. We, as far as Ebro and Xylem Analytics is concerned, this is where the full potential of Ebro is utilized, not only as a product that they need to use, but also as the brand and with the people around it and goes with it and people supporting it, that is surely beneficial for your daily routine works, monitoring and recording requirements, and of course, for process validations. And aside from the typical validation that we normally perform in our laboratories and also in our production facilities, I'd also like to share with you um, a validation in a form of thermal mapping for warehouses, storages, refrigerators, stability cabinets, incubators, all these things that need to be validated in the pharmaceutical especially. Now we start with our main topic, and that's qualifications and validations. But remember, everything is through the Ebro approach. Aside from our distributors who know very well about the Ebro products, not all from the customers and the end users are familiar with them. So I kindly bring to your attention um, the products in this slide because we will be using all these in our succeeding presentation. What is qualification and validation? There's some confusion when we talk about these two, especially in the food sector. But because validation consists of three qualification stages, and we've heard about the IQ all the time in the medical and pharmaceutical. IQ and OQ being the installation qualification and operational qualification. Normally, this burden is passed on to the suppliers or to the manufacturers, and it's it's a proof, it's a documentation that actually directs us to our predefined specifications and criteria. What is more important in these qualification stages is the PQ, or what we call the performance qualification. This is what we typically call validation. And when you compare it with the IQ, OQ, the responsibility with the PQ lies more on the end user. So it is a kind of documentation that should present in paper and in records that processes operate the way they are designed to function. And in Ebro's case, critical parameters are normally temperature, pressure, conductivity, humidity, and others. And it must be stable over time and under both normal and worst case conditions. But normally, we always do it in worst case conditions. Regardless of where the definition of validation comes from, whether it's from Europe or from the US or from Japan or from Korea, they're actually the same in substance. It's all those documentation and predefined acceptance criteria. Now, taking into excerpt the definition from the FDA, when it says it should be an action of providing, in accordance with the principles of GMP, that all procedures, processes, machineries, and activities, procedures, etc., actually leads to the expected results. And now we go to the food industry first. What are the expected results? The most important ones, we have a lot in the food industry, but these two are the most important. We process our food products for the consumers, and they should be able to destroy all microorganisms. and that's what we call commercial sterility. Why do we have to say commercial sterility? It is because absolute sterility is not possible in food products. Um, Commercial sterility is all about food safety. And then second is quality. Now, quality in terms of what kind of products you produce. But we all have our corresponding criteria, and that covers the sensory attributes, the smell, the odor, the texture, and also the criteria on safety without compromising on our desired food nutrients. Um, I didn't know this before when I was doing thermal process validations. I thought Ebro is just a data logger, but actually they are the most practical solution for validating food processes, because when you are able to work with their software is also able to calculate the lethality values, whether it's a sterility value or sterilization value represented by F sub naught, or pasteurization values, or even cooking values. Um, all these depending on your target microorganisms. Everything is possible with the Ebro software. You'll know about it later. We call it the WinLog Pro software. Um, just for the information for the people from the medical and pharmaceutical industries, actually validation in food is more tedious. We concede to the fact that in the pharmaceutical and medical, your paperworks are overwhelming. It's all about paperworks. But in the food industry, there's a lot of things, a lot of parameters that needs to be validated or measured. And I am very happy to find one solution from Ebro. And I don't think our partners in Asia Pacific are even selling this one, but vacuum measurement is very necessary for the canning operations. And it's good um, that Ebro can offer the solution to the food industry, because we cannot live with dial thermometers or dial or vacuum gauge that are dial type all the time. So this is a good solution, and vacuum is a very important parameter that needs to be measured in order for our processes to be successful. It's actually an SOP to measure the vacuum impact foods. Why do we measure in the food processes? And what you measure before and after the implementation of the thermal processes. We already know that. I know some of my customers from before are attending this webinar, and most of them knows that recording the initial temperatures before any heat treatment must be performed, and for the very important reason that you have to know your initial microbial load and if there's any growth occurring already. Then you have the post-process temperatures that you need to measure as well. And this is very important. And if you see the table just below this slide, you'll see the regrowth properties for all the microorganisms that could be present in our food products. Um, it is common knowledge in the food industry that cooling after heat treatment is very critical because it is supposed to prevent microbial regrowth. Um, Let me explain this. If we are able to make a microorganism fall down to sleep. We don't want it to wake up after the process. So we have to keep it sleeping all the time until the desired shelf life of the product is met. What you measure before and after the implementation of the thermal processes. I'd like to speak more into detail about this, but definitely not everyone will be able to appreciate it. But when we say thermal process or heat treatment, it's not only referring to high temperatures. It can also refer to low temperatures and sometimes very low temperatures. And each of these methods are actually targeting the same objective, and that is to inactivate the microorganisms present in our food products. In order for us to progress with our validation, we have to think about Ebro now as just a simple data logger because the first thing that we need to perform is data acquisition. And regardless of whether you're using a retort or a UHT machine or a pasteurizer, data acquisition is a must. But let's say, for example, retorts. Actually, for pharma and medical, retort in food is actually similar to the autoclaves in the pharmaceutical. For example, if you see the pictures below, these these are called retards, but when you go to pharmaceutical companies, it looks very similar in their production facilities. Here, we need to perform heat distribution studies or HDT. And well, coming into my mind right now, some of us are using very expensive data loggers or a very expensive validation system for performing heat distribution tests. And following the regulations, in a typical 4-basket retort, we require about more than 25 measuring points. And Ebro was a solution for that. I'll just inform you later on how we can provide you with these solutions. But aside from the heat distribution test, then you are required to perform heat penetration tests as well. This is actually using one product from Ebro that can perform both. And I will not mention about thermocouples and cables or wires as a solution for this one because most Ebro products have radio mode capabilities, and that means even if you have a wireless logger from Ebro, you can have real-time data coming to your computer. And then I move to other slides now. Aside from this distribution and heat penetration, you need a lot of tests also for measurements or for establishing process schedules in different can sizes and in different packaging formats. There's a mathematical method of simulating processes and arriving to a process schedule that can be used for different can sizes or dimensions. But some of those are not applicable to flexible containers or semi-flexible containers. And Ebro's approach is always to encourage the food industry to make actual measurements in order for them to establish a kind of process schedule that is just right for their products. And I'll show you more actually about this one because when you perform heat penetration, you are also using this for product development. Maybe maybe none of you or maybe only some of you have seen this kind of product developments in the industry. Who can ever imagine some manufacturing companies trying to can ducks in big cans? Um, I'll tell you, this did not progress, but heat penetration measurements using the EBI11s could be the ultimate solution for these kind of experiments. When I say EBI11s, these are Ebro's very, very small data loggers. The importance of measuring your products or your processes is actually affecting your final product. I'm using this as an example because our director from Germany loves shrimp so much. So Mr. Ebro will definitely try this because this has been out of the market already. You see, without measurements, you can affect some over processing or cooking, and it's not good for shrimps at all. So that is some kind of a reminder that we cannot always refer to references from the books. We should have our own measurements for our own product development. And when we say wireless, it doesn't offer only the accuracy of measurements. Most of the wireless data loggers in the industry now are using PT1000 sensors. And this is very stable compared to thermocouple wires that is normally used in the food industry. But aside from this advantage, you don't have to go inside the retort anymore to position the loggers or to bring the thermocouples from outside the vessel to inside the vessel. It's being heated up at 121 degrees Celsius for processing your products, and you can imagine how hard it is to retrieve the loggers or the thermocouples back after the process. And for spiral cooker coolers, my goodness, it's difficult. You don't want to be inside this machinery. So if you see my cursor, by 11 lugger. These are very small luggers that you can actually just place inside these spiral cooker coolers wherever you may want to locate them for the IQ, OQ, and PQ, and also the same set of luggers that you may place inside the cans. So, and you are still able to calculate the process using the WinLog Pro software. Aside from sterilizers or retorts, in the food industry, we also have pasteurizers. And we have many types of pasteurizers. We have the conventional kettles, steam jacketed kettles. We also have pasteurizer tunnels, and we have an improvised hot water bath. And this is normally used in the Philippines. If you remember, my friends from the Department of Science and Technology, some of our crab meats in cans, they are actually pasteurized in hot water baths, similar to what's in the picture. But you know, we are talking about low acid food products, and we have we are talking about the most heat resistant microorganism, and we only pasteurize them. That's quite a risk. Actually, the people from the academe from long time ago, they are not supporting this kind of method, but it's the only choice, and it's the only option for people producing crab meat because they are so heat sensitive. But what we can offer as a solution now is with this logger here that is very small. You can actually just keep it inside the crab meat, whether it's in can or in plastic tubs, and let it measure the complete process from pasteurization to chilling to blasting to cold storage. And of course, don't choose it for transport, but it's a complete solution to validate your complete process for low acid food products such as crab meats. Aside from pasteurization, we also have the UHT. Um, Maybe some of you are familiar with the sous vide process or the cook chill process, and then also the freezing, where we have many types of freezing methods. We have the IQF, blast freezing, ethanol freezing. For example, your tuna, they are um, um, implemented inside ethanol freezing before distribution and other things. So that's almost about it in the food industry. Um, the most important thing after data acquisition is data evaluation. And all these report generations from all your data acquisition or all your gathered data or information can be generated automatically using the WinLog Pro software. And that includes the lethality value calculations, such as the FO values or the pasteurization values or the cooking values. And for qualifying your processing machineries, you can have all the kind of reports that you find important for your validation. And some of them is represented to you by generating for yourself statistics report or deviation reports. And the only important thing actually with you to be able for you to arrive to a very good result is to know your target microorganisms for your type of food product. And these are the different microorganisms that I am talking about. There are a lot to talk about applications in the food industry, but rest assured that we can talk more about it and we will find the time. But now we have to go to the pharmaceutical and medical. This is just an appetizer. Let's talk about validation in a kind of perspective that allows everyone from the food industry, the pharma and medical to appreciate it more because we do not have the luxury of time to discuss things in full specific details. So food people, don't leave. Please don't leave. You have some learnings from this. This is how it goes in the pharma and medical. Everything is connected and always related to the legal standards and norms. And we have, for example, the FDA and all their code of federal regulations that are published. And this includes the 21 CFR 210. We also have the 21 CFR Part 11 and many other things, all related to GMP rules and SOPs. And we also have some standards and norms from the European commissions, like the European Pharmacopoeia. They speak the same, they speak different language, and I mean, they present things differently, but actually their objectives are the same. And all their published guidelines and norms are actually referring to or directing us all to common objectives, whether it's for sterilizers. You see how defined it is in the pharma and medical. They have different norms for big steam sterilizers and another norm for small steam sterilizers. In food, we only have one or two guidelines that are the same. So this is the main difference between the validation, especially when in terms of validating sterilization processes in medical and pharmaceutical and compared to food. But what is very interesting for pharma and medical is that Ebro is actually offering them the complete solution. And that is, aside from the parametric measurements that involves measurements of temperatures, pressure, humidity, and so on and so forth, we also have part of our package and solution, the Bowie and Dick test. By the way, the Bowie and Dick test, it's an indicator. And in food, we use a lot of indicators. It's somewhat similar to that. So in conclusion, no, from the brief presentations, of course, there are too many norms and standards. The requirements to the performance of the validation in these two industries, the medical and the pharmaceutical, they have really increased that, you know, I have to tell our partners in Asia Pacific, we don't sell we don't sell Ebro to the customers. We don't sell this to the medical and the pharmaceutical people. We offer these products as a solution to their requirements, to their validation requirements, because they need it. And then, of course, it's a high level of expertise that is required for you to be able to perform a validation procedure, especially with sterilization procedures. But what is good with the pharmaceutical and medical is that people in these institutions, in related commissions, and even from the FDA itself and from the PDA itself, or from the European Commissions itself, they publish a lot of guidelines for this industry. And these are just examples of the guidelines available for these industries. PDA, it's not public display of affection. Actually, it's called the Parenteral Drugs Association. Um, I love this association, and they are very unselfish to the industry, and all they needed is for the industry to remain competitive as against the evolutions of technology. And we'll speak about these kind of evolutions later on. Sterilization. This is where we always start with the validation. And in the medical, um, we can have different sterilization settings for medical processes in terms of sterilization, because they are dealing with different kind of procedures. For example, for spores that are generated by lower creatures like bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and so on and so forth, um, they have a specific approach for this in sterilization. But in most cases, though, most of these microorganisms can be addressed using a sterilization setting of 121 degrees Celsius or 2 bar in specific minutes. Look at this slide. These are the requirements for validating a sterilization process in the medical and pharmaceutical application. They need the D value is very important. And the D value is a critical factor to arrive to the correct F value. F value being the sterilization value from the pharmaceutical perspective. And these things must be defined. And how are you able to arrive to the correct F value calculations in Ebro? softwares, namely the WinLog Pro or the WinLog Validation, we can enter actually the D values and the Z values and the initial temperature references where you would like the FO value provided to the process. These can all be input depending on your own requirement. And all these formulas that are listed here, they are integrated into the WinLog Pro and WinLog Validation software. Now we go to pharmaceutical, and it's basically the same. In pharmaceutical, everything is sterilized from containers that are used for packaging of samples and or gloves or clothings or lab gowns, masks, everything. They need to be sterilized in pharmaceutical processes. And all of these procedures, we are guided by published guidelines and standards all the time. And that means you cannot deviate from the published or internal SOPs that you also have. And most importantly, when performing validation in pharmaceutical, whether it's sterilization or other applications, you will always need a validation protocol that must be approved by the QMS people or officers. The only difference with the pharmaceutical and medical, the pharmaceutical applications have varying sterilization methods for their type of products. Normally, what we use in the medical and pharma are steam sterilizers, but in the pharmaceutical, they will have different kind of sterilization methods, and maybe probably some of you have heard about depyrogenation, and this is a kind of sterilization method where you use very high temperatures. What we normally have now used in the pharmaceutical companies are depyrogenation tunnels. Um, they are very efficient for their production needs. Then we have the ethylene oxide sterilization. Um, if you are familiar with gauge or a goose or band-aids or all those things that you need to cover your wounds, these need sterilization, but they cannot be treated using high temperatures. So the only way we can sterilize this kind of products is by ethylene oxide sterilization. And this kind of sterilization method must be validated regularly. And we have loggers that are explosion proof, EX certified. And these are the only loggers that you can use in this kind of sterilization machine. Aside from temperature, you need relative humidity loggers to validate ethylene oxide sterilization machineries. Now, how can the software, the Ebro WinLog validation software, or the WinLog Med software in the medical, how can this help you with your validation procedures? It can help you a lot because it's so straightforward to help you with your evaluations for your sterilization cycles. It can automatically detect the different stages of your sterilization cycles, from the heating to the come up to the equilibration time up to the holding time, and even when you require it, it can also give you some information about how it's being cooled during the process. And it will automatically give you an indication whether it's a passing sterilization process or a failing sterilization process. And all of this criteria for pass and fail criteria are used by the WinLog validation or WinLog Pro are guided by the regulations. It's not deciding by itself without any reference to the norms or to the guidelines or to the available standards. So you can expect actually that from using the WinLog validation or WinLog med, what you get is the correct evaluation of your process. And these are our solutions for the corresponding standards like the ISO 17665 for small and large steam sterilizers. Ebro has made up this kind of set in order for you to perform a complete validation for sterilization processes. And that to me is cool, really. And all the certifications that they find necessary to share with the end users. These are just examples, screenshots from the software. And this is how the new EBI 12 looks like. It can go with multiple temperature points, such as this one, where you see 4 temperature points and then pressure sensor in the same logger. So these are the documentations. It is compliant to 21 CFR Part 11, so you can generate it and save it in a PDF format, or you can import it and share it with your management validation officers in a very secure format, such as the PDF format. Now, this is the only thing that makes Ebro to a certain level that is incomparable to the other competition, the EBI 16. And this will be very much appreciated by the people in the medical industry. And some laboratories in the pharmaceutical industry is also using this. Normally, if you hear about Bowie and Dick tests, you are talking about chemical indicators all the time, but not anymore with this kind of technology. And just to explain to you how it looks like, this is actually to explain to you that the Bowie and Dick test logger is actually a PCD, or what we call a process challenge device. It simulates the kind of testing that you perform using chemical indicators. And it's like, I apologize to Kolthoff, but maybe in the near future, we say goodbye to chemical indicators. Although personally, it's always nice to combine both using the electronic um, Bowie and Dick test logger and the chemical indicators, because the EBI 16 Bowie and Dick test logger does more. It gives you a digital archive for complete record and documentation, and it's helping you to avoid transcription errors from using Bowie and Dick chemical indicator results. And it can also perform leak test. It can give you some sterilization parameters and even FO value. So it's really a good product. I'm so excited to use this more use this in the sterilization validations. And it's using the same software, the WinLog validation and the WinLog web. Sorry, WinLog med. That's how it looks like. And it will give you an indication whether it's passing or failing. And these are the different other applications in the pharma. We can have the validation also for incubators, for For refrigerators, we have the new logger for specially made for validating or mapping refrigerators in your laboratories. And also the kind of logger, just the right logger for you to perform thermal mapping of enormous big warehouses that is being used by the pharmaceutical industry. I, I, I personally think that this is where Ebro can help the industry because the industry, for the thermal mapping objectives of big warehouses such as this, and they need hundreds of loggers, they don't need expensive loggers to do the job actually. And I appreciate the works of Ebro that they are able to produce some affordable loggers that are just sufficient for using in the thermal mapping of these large warehouses and with a software that can do all the calculations, including mean kinetic temperatures or MKT calculations. Um, I think this is where Ebro can be very, very big in the near future. And stability rooms, warehouses, the same loggers that we are using for the warehouses. And we are running out of time, but we can always give you the complete presentation for this. But the rest of the slides are referring to the guidelines and procedures. But let me end up with the control and monitoring of warehouses for pharmaceutical. That's the EBI 25. This is the ultimate solution for this kind of control and monitoring. So I think I'll have to end now. So Michael, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much for your time and that very professional presentation. I hope everybody could source a lot of information from it and could answer some of the questions that you came into the presentation with. At this time, we'd like to open up the question and answer session. So please feel free to type out your questions within the chat box that you can find on the right side of your GoToWebinar screen. So Alan, there's obviously a lot of interest in your presentation because questions have been coming in while you were speaking, and we can jump ahead with some of these. The first one concerns calibration of the EBI data loggers. Specifically, given that some of the EBIs have no probe and can't be calibrated using the calibration baths, how or what kind of instrumentation is used for the calibration of the EBI data loggers?
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. Calibration is an issue actually, and it's a very good question to start this discussion. Calibration is very important for the loggers that are especially used for validation purposes. I don't I don't really recommend that you calibrate your loggers yourselves, especially when it's during the annual required period. But considering that they're asking about data logger without probes and they cannot immerse it in an oil bath, then they can use a dry black. But what type of logger are they using? Exactly. Is that a validation logger or just a cold chain logger? It's These two are different. The validation loggers are waterproof and water immersion is impossible. Water ingression inside the logger is impossible. So that means you can use your oil bath to calibrate this even without the external probe. But when you are using cold chain loggers, you cannot do that. So we might be able to provide you with a procedure if the management allows, but personally, I will not allow that. So it's actually different kind of solution for different kind of loggers. And maybe what you can do with this case is that just let me know if it's a validation logger or a cold chain logger, then I'll get back to you with more clear details about the procedures. That's it, Michael. I give it back to
Okay,
you.
thanks, Alan. Actually, there's a second part to that calibration question, and that is how often should the EBI data loggers be calibrated per year?
We always follow the regulations in Ebro and in Xylem, and the requirement is always 1 year annual recalibration. That's what we
Okay, great.
require.
Thanks, Alan. Moving on to the next question. Um, how many data loggers are needed to do a mapping for 60 to 200 liter autoclave?
60 to 200 liter capacity autoclave. We have, is this for pharmaceutical? Uh, if it's for pharmaceutical, then we have to follow the guidelines, and we have some guidelines that are available from the PDA. Normally it says 12, but you are saying here it's 200 liter. Actually, the guidelines say it doesn't specify the area or the capacity of the autoclave. So it is safe for me to say now that the quantity of loggers for sterilization of this size of autoclave is 12.
Perfect. Thanks, Alan. Okay, moving on. Um, just working through here. Do we need a special qualification to perform validation for medical or hospital steam sterilizer or washer?
I beg your pardon. Come again, Michael. A special? Can you say it again?
Sure. Yeah, the question is, do we need a special qualification to perform validation for medicals or hospital steam sterilizer or washer? I,
If you will, if you will ask me, I will always follow the regulations and the guidelines because in the medical, it is a very sensitive area, validation of sterilizers. Um, I would not recommend or encourage you to modify your procedures for validating sterilizers, especially when you are dealing with hospitals or medical. So stick to the guidelines
all right, thanks,
or
Alan.
SOPs.
I guess the next question is, uh, when approaching customers about the EBI 11 and 12s, you know, they're asking you or suggesting that, listen, you've got a great product, but it's much more expensive than the competitor. How do you respond to this?
Um, what I know is that if you are able to invest a 60,000 US dollar wired system and be able to validate a thermal process in food, then you have a wireless solution in the same price range. Um, if they are saying that it's more expensive compared to the other brands or competition, what I can boast of for Ebro setup at the moment is that they are not buying the validation system alone. It comes with it, the local support, and I think to me that's very important. And I hope there are no managers listening to us right now. But when I support the industry, I don't really charge you, and I'm prepared and committed to help you. And I'll do this for the rest of my career with you, bro. And so that's not really a cheap solution, isn't it?
Good, thanks, Alan. Uh, Actually, I'd like to take you back to the previous question uh, concerning
Calibration.
the special qualification to perform validation for medical and
Mm.
hospital steam sterilizers. The second question that came up concerning that is in regards to the guideline that you were talking about. Where can we get that guideline?
I'll send it to you, Michael. You know, my apologies to the person asking this, but what I have now is a small rectangular office, and I've locked myself in. And all I have right now is my computer and my headset and the microphone. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you with more detailed information about these guidelines. I'll share it with you. Three of them I have.
Terrific. Just as a reminder to all of our attendees, we will be following up next week with an email that will include the PowerPoint, a link to the recording of this presentation, and we can also include these guidelines that Alan is talking about. So Alan, just to move on, there's actually quite a few questions that are rolling in now. Um, from the food industry, is it necessary to process a maximum load when conducting HPT?
In the food industry, when you are conducting heat distribution tests, you are already able to locate your worst loading configuration or your worst possible scenario. And you always base from this heat distribution test result in performing your heat penetration test procedures. That is what I will really recommend, especially when you are establishing a process schedule for your product. Always use the kind of scenario that you used in from conducting your heat distribution test. That I am sure about.
Okay, Alan, moving on to the next question. Can the Ebro wireless data, real-time data loggers, are they applicable for all types of retorts, such as steam, water spray, and water immersion retorts?
Except for water immersion, because water in itself is a barrier for transmission, for data transmission. And the answer is yes, but we have to check it. You have to test it for water spray retorts. Um, it is possible to use real time or radio mode with the loggers because we have accessories that could strengthen the signal from your interface and your data logger. So this is actually a very interesting development with Ebro. It is possible.
That, that was actually the second part of the question. How stable is the signal?
We have, if you are transmitting every second, it will transmit every second. But as similar to other technology, we have to test it. You have to optimize the setup in a way that it's transmitting real time without any delays. But yeah, it is good. It is really good.
All right, thank you. And if we want to calibrate EBI 11, what kind of dry bath do we need?
EBI 11 has a range of from 0 to 120 or 130 or 140 maximum. It can be calibrated in an oil bath. But if they are using a dry block, it's also possible. But it's difficult with a dry block to introduce the whole EBI 11 especially when your EBI 11 has very short sensor lengths. So it depends. Please check the length of your EBI11 sensor and see if it can be inserted to the dry block. Then it's possible. If not, then just immerse the whole EBI11 in the oil bath. So you have two options.
Okay, Alan, next question. Is the WinLog software capable of processing calculations using both general and ball method?
Um, General method, it's the accumulated FO value from start to finish of the process. Ebro can do that, but I haven't really confirmed the ball calculations at this time. So I will get back to you about the formula method or the ball method later on.
Okay, and actually
Well,
we
one
have a
thing,
number, sorry, please continue,
yeah,
Alan.
one thing for sure is that it's using the general method, and that's good enough for the food industry at the moment. But I understand though that some development people and some quality people would like to simulate the process, and they can only do this using the ball method. So I'll get back to you with more details about this later on. Thanks, Michael.
No problem. Again, any question that we don't have the exact answer to or that we're missing some kind of documentation, we'll definitely append that to the email that we're sending out next week. Okay, we are running out of time, so just a couple more questions. Alan, if we want to, if a company who is into processing low acid canned foods is just starting their business, can they avail these systems for process validation?
The answer is definitely yes. Yes.
Okay, moving on. Do we have a video or tutorial in using Ebro for the food industry?
That's difficult. Maybe if I can have some time, I'll be performing some validation with our partner in the next few weeks. Then maybe we can record this one for you. We have to confirm this, but this is what I intend to do or to have in the near future.
Okay, and I think this will have to be our last question. Will the products, will the products be over processed or under processed when you pasteurize your products in a non-fully loaded compared to a fully loaded autoclave using time and temperature parameters?
Uh, I think they have to say the question again because when you
That was quite.
no, Michael, when you say pasteurization and you talk about autoclave, it's kind of difficult to answer this, but maybe you can say it again because I got confused with pasteurization and then using autoclave because you cannot pasteurize in an autoclave unless you switch off the pressure and keep it low. Can you say it again?
Sure. Okay. Will the products be over processed or under processed when you pasteurize your products? She might be meaning sterilization here. Your products in a non
Okay.
fully loaded compared to a fully loaded autoclave.
Okay. If they say sterilization, then the answer is no, no, they are not going to over process it because they are still using the same process schedule as what they are using for fully loaded autoclaves. So as long as you are not changing any parameters or any schedules or settings in your process schedule, then there's no risk of over processing or overcooking or undercooking.
Terrific. Thanks, Alan. All
Welcome.
right. Well, I apologize to everyone. Obviously, there's a huge interest in this webinar. This is easily noticed by the number of questions that have come in. Again, keep your eyes out for an email that'll be coming through next week, which will include a link to this webinar, to the recording, the presentation, as well as other documentation that's been requested. We'll also have a list of all these questions and the answers provided by Allan. If there are any other additional questions that you would like to ask, please send them to the email address that was included on the invitation, info.apac@xylem.com, xyleminc.com, and we'll certainly include them in the list that will be provided next week. Mr. Ebro, Allan, Javier, thank you again for such a wonderful hour, and we look forward to cooperating with you in another webinar, hopefully in the near future.
Thanks to you, Michael, and thanks to everyone who found the time to join the webinar. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a good day.
Goodbye.